the first time Penelope Carter walked into the boardroom at Montgomery Manufacturing. She noticed everything except the man who would change her life. She was too busy cataloging the water stains on the ceiling, the flickering fluorescent light in the corner, and the ancient coffee maker that looked like it predated the internet. As the newly hired operations manager, her job was to identify inefficiencies, and this textile factory in North Carolina had plenty of them. What she did not notice was Adrian Iqbal watching her from the doorway, his dark eyes taking in the way she moved through the space with purpose, the way her copper hair caught the awful lighting and somehow made it look intentional. He had flown in from the company headquarters in New York specifically to meet the woman his regional director kept praising, though he had not expected her to be so young or so focused that she would walk right past him without a glance. "You must be Miss Carter," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Penelope spun around, nearly dropping her tablet. The man standing there was not what she expected from a manufacturing executive. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his presence filled the dingy room in a way that made the peeling paint seem almost irrelevant. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from years of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "I am." "And you are?" she asked, extending her hand professionally even as her heart rate picked up for reasons that had nothing to do with being startled. "Adrian Iqbal. I own the company." His handshake was firm, warm, and lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time, though she found herself wishing it had gone on longer. "Welcome to Montgomery Manufacturing. I apologize for the state of this facility. That's why you're here." Over the next 3 weeks, Penelope threw herself into her work with the kind of dedication that had earned her a master's degree in industrial engineering by 24, and a reputation for turning failing operations into profitable ones by 26. She spent her days on the factory floor, talking to workers, analyzing production lines, and creating detailed reports that she emailed to the executive team each evening. What surprised her was how often Adrian responded personally. Not with the kind of brief acknowledgement she expected from a CEO, but with thoughtful questions and observations that showed he actually read every word. Sometimes they exchanged a dozen emails in an evening, the conversation flowing from production metrics to workplace culture to the best pizza places in Charlotte. She learned he had built Montgomery Manufacturing from a single struggling factory into a network of 15 facilities across the Southeast, that he had a younger sister studying medicine at Johns Hopkins, that he preferred Earl Grey tea to coffee, despite being surrounded by coffee drinkers his entire life. She learned he was funny in a dry, understated way that made her laugh out loud at her laptop screen late at night. What she did not learn, because it never came up naturally in their conversations about textile machinery and employee retention rates, was that Adrian was Muslim. His faith was deeply personal, a cornerstone of his life that shaped his ethics and his business philosophy, but it was not something he advertised. He prayed 5 times a day in his office, gave generously to charity through structures that kept his donations anonymous, and conducted his business with an integrity that his competitors found both admirable and frustrating. Penelope, meanwhile, had grown up in a small Methodist church in rural Virginia, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and faith was woven into the fabric of daily life as naturally as breathing. She still attended services when she could, found comfort in familiar hymns, and kept a small cross on a chain that had belonged to her grandmother tucked inside her shirts, close to her heart. Neither of them thought about these differences, because they were too busy falling for each other in the way that people do when they connect on every level that seems to matter. Shared values about treating workers fairly, about building something meaningful rather than just profitable, about the importance of family and loyalty, and doing the right thing even when it was harder than doing the expedient thing. Adrian found reasons to visit the Charlotte facility more frequently than any other property in his portfolio. He told himself it was because this turnaround was critical, because Penelope was implementing innovative solutions that could be replicated across all his factories, because he needed to be hands-on with such an important project. He did not admit, even to himself at first, that he engineered these visits just to see her smile when he walked into her temporary office, to watch her eyes light up when she explained some new efficiency she had discovered, to hear her laugh at his jokes in person instead of through the cold medium of email. Penelope told herself she was just being professional when she started wearing her nicest work clothes on the days Adrian was scheduled to visit, just being thorough when she rehearsed her presentations an extra time, just being friendly when she suggested they grab dinner to discuss the quarterly projections, even though they both knew the projections could wait until morning. That first dinner changed everything. They chose a small Italian restaurant near the factory, nothing fancy, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. Adrian ordered chicken marsala and made sure to mention no wine in the sauce, which the waiter accommodated without comment. Penelope had been too nervous to notice, too caught up in the realization that this was not a business dinner at all, that the way Adrian looked at her across the table had nothing to do with production metrics, and everything to do with the way her laugh made his chest feel tight. They talked for 3 hours, about their childhoods, so different yet somehow parallel in the values their parents had instilled, about their dreams, their fears, their terrible taste in reality television that they both pretended not to watch. When Adrian walked her to her car, the North Carolina humidity hung heavy in the air, and Penelope thought he might kiss her. Instead, he touched her cheek gently, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and asked if he could take her to dinner again, somewhere nicer, somewhere that felt like the date they both knew this was becoming. Their second date was at a French restaurant in downtown Charlotte, the kind with prices that were not listed on the menu, and a sommelier who seemed personally offended when Adrian ordered sparkling water instead of wine. Penelope asked about it gently, worried she had made him uncomfortable somehow. "I do not drink alcohol," Adrian said simply. "Personal choice." She nodded, accepting this at face value, and ordered water as well, which made him smile in a way that lit up his entire face. They shared duck confit and talked about everything except work, and when he drove her home in his Mercedes, he walked her to her door and finally kissed her. It was gentle and searching and perfect, and Penelope felt something in her chest click into place like the final piece of a puzzle she had not known she was solving. They dated for 2 months in a blissful bubble, where the only thing that mattered was how well they fit together. Adrian had never felt this way about anyone, had dated occasionally, but always felt something was missing, some fundamental connection that made the relationship feel worth the effort of building a life together. Penelope had been in love before, or thought she had, but nothing compared to the way Adrian looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world, the way he listened to her stories about her nephews with genuine interest, the way he held her hand while they walked through parks and museums and street festivals. It was at a company event, a formal gala celebrating Montgomery Manufacturing's 30th anniversary, when the bubble first showed signs of strain. Penelope wore a deep green dress that made her eyes look like emeralds, and Adrian could barely focus on his own speech because he kept looking at her in the crowd. But after his remarks, as they mingled with employees and investors and local politicians, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach drop. Iqbal runs the company with surprising ethics for someone in textiles, a board member was saying to an investor. Very much in line with his Islamic principles. Honest almost to a fault. Penelope felt the words land like a physical blow, not because they were negative, but because they revealed something fundamental she had not known. She found Adrian 20 minutes later, pulled him aside to a quiet corner near the coat check. "You are Muslim," she said, not quite a question. Adrian's expression shifted, confusion giving way to realization. "Yes, I thought you knew. How would I know? You never mentioned it." Her voice was not accusing, just bewildered. "You never mentioned being Christian, but I saw the cross you wear," he said gently. "I assumed we were both just people whose faith was private. I am Christian, Methodist." The words felt strange, formal, like she was introducing herself for the first time. "Does that matter to you?" Adrian took her hands, his thumbs stroking over her knuckles. "Does my being Muslim matter to you?" Penelope thought about the past 2 months, about every conversation and shared laugh and perfect kiss. "I do not know," she admitted. "I need to think." She left the gala early and Adrian let her go, his heart sinking as he watched her walk away in that green dress. He had been falling in love with her, was perhaps already fully in love, and the idea that their different faiths might be an insurmountable obstacle made him feel sick. Penelope drove home in a daze and did something she had not done in years. She called her mother at 11 o'clock at night. "Sweetheart, what is wrong?" Patricia Carter answered on the second ring, voice full of instant maternal concern. "Mama, if you fell in love with someone from a different faith, what would you do?" There was a long pause. "Is he a good man?" Penelope started crying, surprising herself. "He is the best man I have ever met. He is kind and ethical and makes me laugh, and when I am with him, I feel like the best version of myself. But he is Muslim, and I do not know what that means for us." Her mother's voice was gentle. "Does he treat you well? Does he respect you completely? Then maybe you should learn what his faith means to him before you decide it is a problem. Love does not come around that often, honey. Do not throw it away because you are scared of something you do not understand." Penelope spent the next 3 days researching, reading, trying to understand Islam beyond the shallow headlines and stereotypes. She learned about the 5 pillars, about the emphasis on charity and justice, about the prophets and stories that overlapped with her own tradition. She was surprised to discover how much common ground existed, how many values aligned with her own beliefs, but research could only tell her so much. On the 4th day, she called Adrian and asked if they could talk. They met at the same park where they had walked on their 3rd date, when autumn had just started painting the leaves gold and red. Adrian looked tired, like he had not been sleeping well, and Penelope felt a rush of tenderness that nearly knocked her sideways. "I am sorry I ran away," she said as they walked along the path around the lake. "I was surprised, and I did not handle it well. I am sorry I assumed you knew. My faith is such a fundamental part of who I am that I forget not everyone can see it immediately." Adrian shoved his hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I should have told you explicitly." "Tell me now," Penelope said, stopping on the path and turning to face him. "Tell me what your faith means to you." So Adrian told her. About praying 5 times a day, about how those moments of connection with God centered him and reminded him of what mattered. About Ramadan, the month of fasting that taught empathy and self-discipline. About Zakat, the mandatory charity that ensured he never forgot his responsibility to those less fortunate. about the Quran's teachings on honesty in business, on kindness to workers, on the importance of family and community. His voice was quiet but passionate, and Penelope watched his face as he spoke, seeing depths to the man she loved that she had not fully appreciated before. "Your faith makes you who you are," she said when he finished. "All those things I admire about you, they come from this." "Partly," Adrian agreed, "just as your compassion and your sense of justice come partly from your faith tradition." They walked in silence for a while, watching ducks paddle across the lake. Finally, Penelope said, "I do not know what it means for us long term. Our faiths are different in significant ways." "They are," Adrian acknowledged, "but they are also similar in the ways that matter most. We both believe in God, in treating people with dignity, in living with integrity. We both value family and honesty and commitment." He stopped walking and turned to her, taking her hands. "Penelope, I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since the day you walked past me in that awful boardroom without even noticing I was there. If you need time to figure out whether my faith is something you can accept, I will wait. But I do not want to lose you over this." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too, and I think maybe our different faiths do not have to divide us. Maybe they can make us stronger if we let them." They stood there on the path, holding hands, and Penelope felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty exactly, but a willingness to walk forward into the unknown together. Over the next few months, they navigated their relationship with intentionality and care. Adrian invited Penelope to a community iftar during Ramadan, breaking the fast with dates and water surrounded by families and laughter and prayers in Arabic that she did not understand but found beautiful anyway. She was nervous at first, worried she would say something wrong or offend someone, but everyone was welcoming. Adrian's sister Zara was there, visiting from Baltimore, and she pulled Penelope aside with a grin. "He has never brought anyone to iftar before," Zara said, her eyes dancing. "You must be special." "He is pretty special too," Penelope admitted. Zara squeezed her hand. "I know, and I see the way he looks at you, like you are the answer to prayers he did not know he was saying." In turn, Penelope brought Adrian to Sunday service at her church, a small brick building that smelled like lemon polish and old hymnals. Her parents were there, having driven 2 hours from their small town to meet the man their daughter could not stop talking about. Penelope had been worried about how they would react, but her father shook Adrian's hand with genuine warmth, and her mother hugged him like he was already family. The pastor's sermon that day was about loving your neighbor, about breaking down walls instead of building them, and Adrian listened with the same respectful attention he gave to Friday prayers at the mosque. Afterward, at lunch with her parents, he answered their questions about his business, his family, his intentions toward their daughter with an honesty that won them over completely. "I love your daughter," Adrian said simply, when her father asked him point-blank what his plans were. "I know we are from different faith traditions, and I know that might concern you, but I respect Penelope completely, including her beliefs. I would never ask her to change who she is." Her father studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is all I needed to hear." But their different faiths still required navigation. Adrian did not eat pork, so Penelope learned to cook with chicken and beef and lamb, discovering a whole world of Middle Eastern cuisine that Adrian taught her to prepare. She did not drink much anyway, but she stopped keeping wine in her apartment because she wanted him to feel completely comfortable in her space. When he prayed, she gave him privacy and quiet, understanding that this was sacred time he needed. In turn, Adrian came to appreciate the rhythms of her Christian faith. He accompanied her to Christmas Eve service, watching her face glow in candlelight as the congregation sang Silent Night. He met her for coffee after her women's Bible study, listening to her talk about what she was learning with the same interest she showed in his discussions of Quranic interpretation. When her nephew was baptized, Adrian sat in the front row and witnessed the ceremony with respectful attention, even though infant baptism was not part of his tradition. They talked about the hard questions too, late at night when honesty came easier. About how they would raise children someday, what traditions they would pass on, how they would navigate two different faith communities. These conversations were not always easy, but they approached them with love and a genuine desire to understand each other. "I would want our children to know both traditions," Penelope said one night as they lay on her couch, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "To understand that faith is not about picking sides, but about seeking God in whatever form you understand the divine." "I would want them to choose their own path," Adrian agreed, his fingers threading through her hair. "To be exposed to both Islam and Christianity, and to make their own decisions about what resonates with them. But I would also want them to understand the beauty in both, not to see our differences as a problem to solve but as a richness to celebrate." "You are wise," Penelope murmured. "I am in love," Adrian corrected. "That makes everything clearer." The turning point came almost a year after they started dating, when Montgomery Manufacturing faced a crisis that tested everything Adrian believed about ethical business. One of his suppliers had been using undocumented workers in conditions that bordered on exploitative, and when the news broke, Adrian was faced with a choice. He could quietly sever ties and hope the media storm passed, or he could take public responsibility and implement industry-leading reforms that would cost his company millions. Penelope sat with him in his office at 3 a.m. as he wrestled with the decision, watching him pray for guidance, seeing the weight of it bend his shoulders. This was the man she loved, she thought. Not just in the easy moments but in the hard ones when doing the right thing came at a cost. "What does your faith tell you to do?" she asked gently. Adrian looked up from his prayer mat, his face exhausted but resolute. "To choose justice over profit. To protect the vulnerable even when it is expensive. To lead by example. Then you already know what to do." He held a press conference the next morning, taking full responsibility and announcing a comprehensive plan to audit every supplier, implement worker protections that exceeded federal requirements, and create an industry-wide coalition for ethical manufacturing. The financial analysts predicted his stock would plummet. Instead, it rose as consumers and investors responded to his integrity. Penelope watched the press conference from her office, her heart swelling with pride and love so intense it almost hurt. This man, with his unshakable ethics rooted in Islamic principles that aligned so perfectly with her own Christian values of justice and compassion, was the person she wanted to spend her life with. That evening, Adrian came to her apartment straight from the office, still wearing his suit from the press conference, looking wrung out and vulnerable in a way she had never seen. Penelope opened the door and pulled him inside, holding him tightly. "You were amazing today," she whispered into his shoulder. "I was terrified," Adrian admitted, "but I kept thinking about what you said, about already knowing what to do. And I thought about how my faith demands integrity, how your faith demands compassion, and how we are stronger together than we would ever be apart." He pulled back and looked at her, his dark eyes intense with emotion. "Penelope Carter, I love you. I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart, and the way you sing off-key when you cook. I love how you challenge me to be better, how you understand the parts of me I have trouble explaining. I love that our different faiths have not divided us, but have instead shown us how much common ground we share. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Penelope felt tears streaming down her face, happy and overwhelming. "I love you too. I love your integrity and your kindness, and the way you pray like you are having a conversation with an old friend. I love how you make me laugh and how you take my faith seriously even though it is not your own. Yes, Adrian. Yes to building a life together." He kissed her then, deep and tender and full of promise, and Penelope knew with absolute certainty that this was right. Their different faiths had not been an obstacle to overcome, but a bridge that connected them, showing them depths of understanding and respect that made their love richer than it would have been otherwise. They were married 8 months later in a ceremony that honored both their traditions. The wedding took place in a beautiful garden, neutral ground that belonged to neither church nor mosque, but felt sacred nonetheless. A Methodist minister and an imam co-officiated, each offering prayers and blessings from their traditions. Penelope wore a white dress with lace sleeves, her grandmother's cross hidden beneath the fabric, close to her heart. Adrian wore a tailored navy suit, and when he recited his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I take you as my wife, to honor and cherish, to love in sickness and in health, in prosperity and in hardship. I promise to respect your faith as I respect my own, to build a home where both our traditions are welcome, to raise our children to understand that love transcends the boundaries we sometimes let divide us. You are the answer to prayers I did not know how to say, and I will spend my life being worthy of your love." Penelope's vows were just as heartfelt. "I take you as my husband, to honor and cherish, to love without reservation. I promise to respect the faith that makes you who you are, to create a home where God is welcome in all the forms we understand the divine. You have shown me that different does not mean divided, that our faiths can strengthen rather than separate us. I will spend my life loving you with everything I am." The reception was a joyful blend of both their cultures, traditional American wedding food alongside Middle Eastern dishes that Adrian's extended family had prepared. Her church friends danced alongside his mosque community, barriers dissolving in the universal language of celebration. Zara gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry, talking about how her brother had finally found someone who matched his intensity and his integrity. Penelope's father gave a speech about gaining a son, about how love builds bridges where fear constructs walls. When Adrian and Penelope took the floor for their first dance, surrounded by everyone they loved, she whispered in his ear, "We did it. We built something beautiful." "We are just getting started," Adrian whispered back, pulling her closer. They honeymooned in Morocco, a country where Adrian's heritage and Penelope's adventurous spirit could intertwine. They explored medinas and mountains, mosques and museums, and Penelope fell in love with the call to prayer echoing over ancient cities at dawn. Adrian watched her navigate this unfamiliar culture with openness and respect, and he fell in love with her all over again. One evening in Marrakech, as they sat on a rooftop watching the sun set over the city, Penelope turned to Adrian with shining eyes. "I have been thinking about what you said, about being stronger together. I think our different faiths make us better people. You challenge me to think about social justice in ways my tradition sometimes overlooks. I hope I challenge you too." "You do," Adrian assured her. "You remind me that faith should be joyful, that devotion can be expressed in laughter and spontaneity, not just in structure and discipline. We balance each other." When they returned from their honeymoon, they moved into a house they had chosen together, a craftsman bungalow with room for a growing family and space for both their traditions. Adrian set up a small prayer room with a mat that faced Mecca. Penelope created a meditation corner with her Bible and the journals where she processed her spiritual thoughts. But most of their devotional life happened in the spaces they shared, in dinner-table conversations about ethics and meaning, in volunteering together at a homeless shelter that served everyone regardless of faith, in the quiet moments before sleep when they prayed in their own ways for the same things. Gratitude, guidance, the continued blessing of the love they had found. A year into their marriage, Penelope became pregnant. She was nervous about how they would navigate raising a child between two faiths, but Adrian was calm and confident. "We will teach our child about both traditions," he said, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We will take them to mosque and to church. We will celebrate both our holidays, and when they are old enough, they can decide for themselves what resonates with their soul. All I want is for them to understand that faith, real faith, is about love and justice and compassion. The rest is details." Their daughter Amira was born on a crisp October morning, her arrival greeted with prayers in Arabic from her father and prayers in English from her mother, and love in the universal language of parents holding their child for the first time. She had Penelope's copper hair and Adrian's dark eyes, and from the beginning, she was surrounded by the richness of two traditions that taught her the same fundamental truth: that God is love, expressed in infinite ways. As Amira grew, she attended both Sunday school at her mother's church and Islamic classes at her father's mosque. She celebrated Christmas with stockings and carols, and Eid with new clothes and sweet pastries. She learned to say grace before meals in English and Bismillah in Arabic. And she grew up understanding that her parents' different faiths were not a source of conflict, but a wellspring of wisdom, that their interfaith marriage was not a compromise, but a celebration of the common ground that connected them. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Adrian and Penelope stood in their backyard watching 3-year-old Amira chase fireflies in the twilight. Adrian's arm was around Penelope's waist, and she leaned into him with the comfortable ease of long intimacy. "Do you remember when you found out I was Muslim and you panicked?" Adrian asked, amusement in his voice. "I did not panic," Penelope protested, then laughed. "Okay, I panicked a little. I thought our different faiths would tear us apart. Instead, they brought us together." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "You know what I think? I think God, Allah, whatever name we use for the divine, has a sense of humor. Bringing together a Methodist from rural Virginia and a Muslim from a Pakistani immigrant family, letting us fall in love before we even realized we were from different worlds. Maybe it was not a joke," Penelope said softly. "Maybe it was a lesson. That faith is not about the differences we cling to, but about the love that transcends them. That when we are open to understanding instead of judging, when we choose respect over fear, we find common ground we never knew existed." "You have made me a better Muslim," Adrian said seriously. "Your faith, your example of devotion and joy, has deepened my own relationship with God." "And you have made me a better Christian," Penelope replied. "Your discipline, your commitment to justice, has challenged me to live my faith more fully." They stood in silence for a moment, watching their daughter, the physical embodiment of two faiths united in love. Amira caught a firefly gently in her cupped hands, her face illuminated by its glow, and Penelope felt her heart swell with a happiness so complete it felt like a prayer. "We are blessed," she whispered. "We are blessed," Adrian agreed. Years later, when people asked them how they made an interfaith marriage work, Adrian and Penelope gave the same answer: with respect, with open communication, with a willingness to learn and grow and sometimes be uncomfortable. But mostly, they said, with love. The kind of love that sees differences not as obstacles but as opportunities, that builds bridges instead of walls, that understands faith in all its forms as a search for the divine. Their story became something of a legend in both their communities. The Methodist Church in rural Virginia and the mosque in Charlotte both held them up as examples of what was possible when people chose understanding over prejudice. Young couples from different faith backgrounds reached out to them for advice, and Adrian and Penelope always made time to share their experience, to encourage others to take the leap they had taken. Montgomery Manufacturing continued to thrive under Adrian's leadership, his reputation for ethical business practices attracting both customers and top talent. Penelope eventually became Chief Operations Officer, the first woman in the executive suite, and together they built a company culture that reflected both their values. They instituted paid leave for both Muslim and Christian holidays, created prayer spaces for employees of all faiths, and made Montgomery Manufacturing a model for how businesses could honor diversity while maintaining strong values. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adrian surprised Penelope with a trip back to the garden where they had been married. It looked the same, carefully preserved by the owners who had seen dozens of couples exchange vows in that space, but never forgot the interfaith ceremony that had brought two communities together. They renewed their vows there, with Amira as their flower girl and their son Ibrahim, born 3 years after Amira, as the ring bearer. The same minister and imam co-officiated, both of them older now but still committed to building bridges between faiths. This time, when Adrian recited his vows, he added, "You have given me 10 years of joy, 2 beautiful children, and a life richer than I ever imagined. You have taught me that faith strengthens love, that our differences make us better together than we could ever be apart. I choose you again, today and every day for the rest of our lives." Penelope's vows were equally heartfelt. "A decade ago, I walked into a boardroom and did not notice the man who would change my life. But God noticed, brought us together, and gave us the courage to build something beautiful across the boundaries that divide so many. You are my partner, my love, my faith made manifest in the way you live with integrity and compassion. I choose you again, always and forever." As they kissed, surrounded by family and friends from both their communities, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The initial shock of discovering their different faiths, the hard conversations, the intentional choices to understand rather than fear, to build bridges rather than walls. She thought about the CEO from a different religion who had fallen for her, without knowing that their faiths would strengthen rather than divide them. And she felt grateful beyond words for every step of the journey. That night, after the celebration ended and their children were asleep, Adrian and Penelope sat on their back porch under a sky full of stars. Penelope rested her head on Adrian's shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing and being known. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked eventually. "About how lucky we are," Penelope said. "How easily we could have let fear or prejudice or just the difficulty of navigating two faiths keep us apart. But we chose each other, over and over, and built something so much better than what either of us could have created alone." "Not luck," Adrian said firmly. "Grace, blessing, whatever word you want to use for the divine guiding us toward each other and giving us the wisdom to hold on. We did the work, but we had help." Penelope smiled, knowing he was right. Their love story was not just about them, but about something larger, about the possibility of unity in a world that too often chose division, about faith expressed not in rigid boundaries but in open hands and open hearts. As they sat together under the stars, Penelope silently thanked God for the gift of this man, this life, this love that had taught her more about faith than any sermon or scripture study ever could. And beside her, Adrian offered his own prayers of gratitude to Allah for bringing him a partner who challenged and completed him, who showed him that different faiths could be complementary rather than contradictory. Their children grew up strong and confident, comfortable in both their Christian and Muslim heritage, choosing elements from both traditions as they formed their own relationships with the divine. Amira eventually decided she felt more connected to Islam, while Ibrahim found his spiritual home in Christianity, and Adrian and Penelope supported both choices with equal enthusiasm, proud that they had raised children who could think for themselves while respecting both their parents' faiths. The story of Adrian and Penelope became a testament to what was possible when love transcended boundaries, when faith strengthened rather than divided, when two people from different worlds chose to build a bridge and meet in the middle. They lived their values every day, in their marriage, in their parenting, in their business, and in their communities, showing everyone who knew them that different faiths did not have to mean different paths, that God's love was big enough to encompass all the ways humans tried to reach toward the divine. And when they were old, surrounded by grandchildren who carried both their heritages forward into a new generation, Adrian and Penelope looked back on their life together with no regrets, only gratitude. They had built something beautiful, not despite their different faiths but because of them, and their love story continued to inspire everyone who heard it to choose understanding over fear, bridges over walls, and love over everything that tried to divide what faith should unite.